This is Zach Log the Great, and I am here tonight with Overgrown Hobbit, who is part of the team, the cartooning team behind the Arctoons series, Vegfolk Fables, which I don't know if you want to tell people a little bit about that.
Sure. Vegfolk Fables is a alternate universe comic reality on the improbability axis, a little bit higher than Discworld, but a little bit more moral in the ethical axis of reality. And it's been visited by an alien mushroom from another, even more bizarre comic universe. And he is discovering what it's like to be a stranger in a strange land and getting pulled into all the plots and counterplots and weirdnesses of this cartoon universe where the dirt really is magic and therefore the vegetables are sentient, because wouldn't they be?
And also tonight, and I just remembered why I introduced author guests last, Harry Seldon.
I feel like I need to give a longer intro now, so I am Harry Seldon. If any of you are standing, please sit down, and if you care to smoke, I wouldn't mind. Why should I? I'm not really here. As you see, I'm confined to this wheelchair and can't rise to greet you properly.
Okay. And
wait a minute, you said author guest. You said author guest. What did Harry Seldon write?
No, I said why I should introduce the author guest last.
Yes.
I'm like,
yes.
Really
Harry Seldon. Harry Seldon was a he was a TikToker before his time. Well before his time, actually. He made a bunch of 30 to 60-second short videos and then didn't release them for hundreds of years. Very different artistic medium than literature.
And let's see. So we are getting together tonight to talk about Jim Butcher's novel, the second in the Dresden Files series, Full Moon, which, if you're not familiar with, by the way, there will most likely be spoilers all through this discussion. So I would suggest that you read the story first and then come back and listen. But Harry has agreed to give us a quick rundown of the story, and then we will be off to the races.
So, in the Dresden Files universe, there are several different types of werewolf. And if you think about it logically, there's only a couple ways you can possibly have a werewolf. You have a human who can transform into a normal wolf willingly. You can have a human who transforms into a normal wolf unwillingly. You can have a wolf that transforms into a human. You can have a human that thinks like a wolf. You can have a wolf that takes over a human. And we deal with all of them. In this book, the only trope of werewolves that we don't see are the infectious ones. And that's mostly because with 4 different types of werewolves already, if werewolf bites spread werewolf lycanthropy, we would be in a big problem. There would not be future Dresden Files books. They would all just be werewolf books. And he would have to recruit the Lone Ranger for his silver bullets in order to have any chance of stopping the global werewolf apocalypse. But aside from that, we see in this book Harry Dresden deal with basically every trope of werewolves, and we see the unique magic system and the characters that we've already come to know and love from the first novel. Still a bit early, still a bit weird in terms of characterization. Not everything is quite set in stone yet, but we see this. We see a very interesting take on what can be in fantasy an otherwise tired trope.
Okay. And one thing which I hadn't, I've read the entire Dresden Files series. The entire Dresden Files books series. There's some of the comics and there's probably 1 or 2 other associated things I haven't gotten to, but and the role-playing game, which I don't know if that's canon, but whatever. The
role-playing game is not canon. The little notes on it are canon. Apparently, the game is something that the characters have played canonically.
So, anyway, I hadn't really thought about this. I reread it just before I finished rereading it just a couple days ago, and one thing I hadn't considered until I saw it was reading, I think, the TV tropes page on it. This is the second book in the series, and it doesn't. Starting with the third book, starting with Grave Peril, there starts to be an ongoing plot, like that more or less connects them, whereas Stormfront and Full Moon are much more standalone. Like they don't really interact that much with later books. In fact, I was thinking about the only thing that definitely carries on from this one that I can think of is the Alphas, who are the oh gosh, I should have had notes of the 4 different types. The Alphas are a group of voluntary werewolves who have elected to who learned how to do this one shape-shifting spell and have elected to use this to this ability to fight crime and other supernatural perils, and they continue to show up throughout the series, but there's not a lot of other things that kind of carry over after this one that I can think of.
Yeah, there's occasional references to Kim Delaney, a minor character who appeared near the beginning of this novel, but aside from her, and obviously the Alphas, I can't think of anything that directly comes up.
So, but oh crud, that page tore loose, darn it. Anyway, notebook, not the book, not the Full Moon. But how about you, Hobbit? Would you like to give your kind of overall impressions or any big thoughts going into this?
I think that it's a really good continuation from the first book. It's one of those rare cases where you pick up a sequel and the sequel has everything the first book had that you liked about it, and it tells a new story and it expands more upon the world of the story and it still feels consistent to the old world. This is not, going back and rereading it, I was just as happy with it as I was the first time. Even knowing what comes before, that there's more depth, there's more richness to the story later on, it didn't change the fact that this was a really, really fun adventure story about werewolves. Though, thanks to you, I just finally realized Butcher missed one possible werewolf, which was the bite infection werewolf could have been a thing, just that it's a bacteria. And now that we've got antibiotics, it's a non-starter. You get a dog bite, or maybe even one of the vaccines. Early vaccines, it takes out the werewolf virus, so that if you have to get bitten, it has to combine with another, something like maybe Clostridium tetani or whatever the tetanus one in the soil is. And because of tetanus shots and antibiotics, nobody gets werewolfism from a wolf bite unless they're out in the back end of nowhere. And then that explains some depopulation, because eventually everyone's a werewolf and nobody's human. And the world is a lot bigger. And I don't know, you could have had fun with that, with bacterial werewolf.
That's an interesting approach, to have a 5th version that isn't actually magic.
No.
But the danger there is that if it is transmissible like that, you still would have the werewolf apocalypse that must have happened in the past. You go back 200 years ago and you still have the same problem of the werewolves are going to infect everybody pretty quickly. Yeah.
That's a fall of, how does civilization fall? And then the werewolf populations eventually decayed and became just wolves. And, you're
talking a whole precursor civilization.
Yeah, like the Julian May books, that kind of thing.
Okay, kept at bay from the rest of humanity by the Never or something.
Or since this is a world where God and angels exist, the fall. Maybe that's one of the races that was destroyed during the whatchamacallit,
the flood.
The flood. But remember, bacteria can have spores. They can be encapsulated, which allows the possibility of bacterial werewolfism to be found in some tomb that people open up, like
in
they're
Antarctica.
hunting for Noah's Ark.
So you're bringing in not just vampires but mummies as well.
Yes. Wouldn't it be great?
Just so we're clear on what you're combining here.
So, since we're already this far off track, I will mention: have either of you read? Shoot, I don't have the authors. Oh wait, that's the authors. I think it's Larry Niven. What good is a glass dagger?
No, but I have a lot of
I've
Larry
not.
Niven books.
Oh gosh. Okay. Yes, that one has another theory on werewolves, which is pretty interesting. And I would suggest looking that one up. I would be entirely unsurprised if you can find it online, even though it is assuredly still copyrighted. But what good is a glass dagger? Anyway, so just thinking about gonna start chronologically, and we'll see how it goes. The very first couple of chapters starts off with Harry talking to Kim Delaney, and she's trying to get information from him. And he's like, and he looks at this. He's like, "This is way too dangerous. I'm not going to explain this to you." And it's kind of interesting, especially because I saw some people talking about well, you can see over the course of this book that he learns from this. But he doesn't, because this is a very prominent, kind of character flaw of Harry throughout the series. He tends to withhold information even when he doesn't need to. And you see that all the way up through Battleground. Basically, that's the reason. Spoilers for Battleground. That is the reason he gets kicked off or a significant part of the reason he gets kicked off the White Council, because he doesn't want to explain at all what he was doing, during the peace talks, and he could, in that case, he could have given Carlos. He could have given his friends at least a little more information to go on. And people would have worked with him. In this case, and this is also obviously, Monday morning quarterbacking. Okay. Hindsight 2020. But he could have been like, "Kim, what are you trying to do with this?"
Yeah.
And if he had just straightforwardly said, "What are you trying to do with this?" and she had explained she was withholding information as well, then Kim could have lived and not been turned into a hamburger. So
yeah.
Anyway,
so that is actually an interesting one, because it splits two things going on. In one is a stated character flaw, and the other is one that is a trope that we're expected to accept, which I don't accept anymore. The character flaw is that he's a white knight. He is a chivalrous, old school, gentlemanly like guy who wants to protect the gals, which I find completely acceptable and normal and human. But he considers that to be a little, and we're expected to kind of take it as a character flaw. And it kind of is, in the sense that he wants to protect the innocent, he wants to protect women, and he thinks that's the role men should do. So he's trying to protect people from themselves, and that includes some women, which we're supposed to think, oh, okay, these women can take care of themselves, so he's making a mistake. When, as you point out, the problem isn't he's not being feminist enough. The problem is that he's not being honest enough and not telling them the facts, such as, I can't tell you this because if I tell you how to do it, it's the equivalent of telling someone how to build a nuclear bomb. Okay, that would be wrong. So no, I'm not going to tell you how to blow up Manhattan. All right, full stop. Sorry about that, but you can hurt a lot of people if I told you how to do this. And I don't have any reason to believe that if I told you, you wouldn't go ahead and do it. Okay. And she's like, but I have to blow up Manhattan. And then there you go. So that's reasonable. But the one that really kind of ticked me off when I read it the second time was Murphy.
Yeah.
She, and also him, because he wasn't being, like I said, being really honest.
Way more hostile in this book than than the previous book or any of the subsequent ones, and I don't blame her.
I do. I don't. I except for one thing he should have said, which would have enlightened things, was that I don't think she was justified in being as hostile to him as she was. Especially her. She was willing to abuse power multiple times to take revenge on him for being mean to her. She knew she had no reason to assume that he was a bad guy. Everything she'd ever done with him has shown this is a man willing to live in poverty, suffer, go through all kinds of hell on earth simply to do the right thing. But now suddenly she's being thwarted, she's under pressure, and that justifies her completely abandoning that friendship. I don't think that she was being fair, but more importantly, I think Dresden missed an opportunity to say, Murphy, you don't tell me things because they're confidential. You're a police officer and you can't tell me. There's things I can't tell you about my bosses because I'm part of an organization that's secret, that's private, that's like the police, and I can't tell you, okay? So I'm not choosing to not tell you this because I'm a bad guy. I'm choosing not to tell you this because you're not a cop like I am. And we just have to agree that some lines we can't cross. He could have said that.
The other thing with that, though, is Harry knows the police exist.
Mm-hmm.
Murphy doesn't know the White Council exists, and that's part of, like, at least at this point, they apparently, he's keeping it as secret as possible, including even the fact that such an organization exists.
Right.
But it's actually kind of funny. I have on chapter 3, which I have to flip. I have my notes over here, but I have on chapter 3 a note, which is something I've thought about before, like outside of this context. But there's this conflict of chivalry or equality.
Yes.
And you cannot have both of those, because a lot of people in different contexts try to have both of those things, but you can't, because chivalry, in the sense we talk about it today, an important part of that is consideration for the weaker, in some sense, depending what the arena is. You're talking about in a different sense possibly, but like if we're all equal, you can't have special consideration for the weaker one, or if you do have special consideration, then we can't all be equal. And that's a problem. That's a kind of internal contradiction for a lot of people, I think.
I think it's definitely an
these days.
internal contradiction for Harry. It's something he goes back and forth on in this book and in several of the others.
Well, and the other thing in terms of Hobbit said that he that Harry considers a character flaw, but she doesn't necessarily. I will say it is. I think it's fair to call it a character flaw in the sense that he does let he does let pretty women get him into trouble, and like, and will.
What kind of film noir detective would he be if he didn't?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm just saying it is a character flaw. Yes, it is almost a required one for the genre, but anyway.
But what I'm saying about Murphy is consider where we were at the end of Stormfront. So Harry had promised to keep her in the loop.
Yep.
And then broke the promise, went off to blanking on his name now.
Sells,
yes.
Sells.
Went to fight Victor Sells by himself.
He didn't have time to tell her, though, did he?
He didn't have time.
No,
I'm saying from Murphy's perspective. So he promised to keep her in on it. He then broke the promise. She finds out that mob boss Johnny Marcone had hired him, or at the very least, all the intelligence she has says that he hired him.
Yeah, because you can always trust the word of a mob boss over someone you've known for 5 years.
But it was but the police did know that Marcone had picked Harry up and driven him in that car ride during Stormfront. That was something that they knew for sure.
Right, but
so you have that. You then have, and Internal Affairs concludes that Harry's working for Marcone, and
again,
that Harry had killed
Karen,
Sells because Sells was operating a rival drug gang, and that Murphy had cooperated in an inter-gang hit.
Yeah.
And throughout this whole book, Internal Affairs is on her case for this.
Mhm. Yeah.
And then
think,
Harry breaks his promise about not telling her stuff again. I can see every decision of Harry seems reasonable when we see it from his perspective, but I can see why she would not be happy with him by the end of this.
I get not being happy with him. What I don't get is her betraying that she betrayed as much as he did, if not more, because she knows how bad Internal Affairs is. The very fact that Internal Affairs is fixated on Harry should immediately tell her, because she knows how wrong they get it in her case, that, and again, she's got the history with him. She knows that Marcone is a liar. He tries to kidnap and pressure people. If she thought, for example, that Marcone had pressured him into this, she would have said, Harry, you can talk to me. Don't fall for this guy. Anything he's promising you, anything that hostages of yours that he has to Fortune, we can help you with this. You don't have to do the right thing, Harry. Walk into the light, But
all right, but Gelman amnesia, that can hit us all. She can. True. It could be. It's not a contradiction for her to know full well that Internal Affairs gets it completely wrong in her case, which it does.
Yep.
And still think that they're right about Harry. Like when that's going, when that's confirming a preconceived notion of yours, that is a very easy mistake to make.
Also, he doesn't do a good job in this book of making this clear, but he sets the stage for it. And in later episodes, you do, I'm not being fair to him. He doesn't set it up as well. There's a bit, I was looking up for that chapter 3 thing you were talking about, Zachlog. Murphy writes, I am not your daughter, Dresden, or says, I am not some porcelain doll on a shelf. I'm a police officer. I catch the bad guys and I put their asses away. And if it comes down to it, I take a bullet so some poor housewife or CPA doesn't have to. And so she has a chip on her shoulder about being a woman in the police force, about her status in the police force, and about people's perceptions of her. And if Harry is playing into all the things that she has issues about, whether he knows it or not, fairly or not, it's reasonable that she would overreact and react unjustly. So he doesn't really spell it out, but in later books it becomes clear. So as you're reading along for the first time, I think it works pretty well in that respect. When you bring up about Gelman amnesia, don't treat Karen like the person she becomes later on. Treat her like the person she's growing and developing from in book 2. So that's a fair point. That's a fair point, because I was judging her by Karen Murphy from later books when I got mad at her in this book.
Yes, Karen Murphy in book 12 would never act like this.
No.
Obviously, but she's not her yet.
No. And that's fair. You shouldn't have that kind of it's what the people do when they go back and blame people in the Middle Ages for not having 21st century sensibilities.
It's true.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. What do we got? I'm kind of flipping through my notes here. I get to chapter 7. In chapter 7, Harry is working in his sub-basement lab, and he's mixing up some potions, and he's also what do you call it? He's also talking with Bob about, he's also finding out about werewolves. So he can make a report for Karen. And this is something that is basically a standard feature of science fiction or fantasy. Because of the nature of the genre, it doesn't happen as much in most other books. This chapter has what's called info dump, where basically the author has to explain the nature of the world to the audience. And depending on the book, depending on the author, it is handled with varying degrees of grace or clumsiness. It would be interesting. I should see if it might be interesting after this to like look up a list of like worst handled info dumps in science fiction.
I think I read one.
But
I don't know if you've ever read the Sector General series, but in that he had a standard info dump to explain some of the medical technology and medical descriptions of aliens, and he literally copied and pasted it from one book to another. It got to the point where characters would apologize before reciting this because he still needs to explain this in case this is somebody's first book, but he knows that regular readers are sick of it by now.
It's like, it's like every training that tells you what to do in terms of giving care starts off with perform hand hygiene covering all surfaces.
Yes, exactly. It's exactly that sort of thing. Just the medicine is you're trying to treat aliens, not just humans.
Yep.
So you're washing your hands. You're also washing your tentacles, possibly.
Yes.
Depending on which species you are. Sorry. Go on, Zach Lug.
But anyway, and I was gonna say, Bob the Skull. I hadn't really thought about this before. He is actually a very good Jim Butcher handles the info dump very well in this chapter, and then actually later there's another chapter which basically largely consists of a summary of the plot so far, where Harry is asleep and is having a dream where he's talking to his own subconscious mind, and that chapter is basically here's a summary of the plot so far. And in both of these cases, Jim Butcher handles it fairly well, and it's kind of like looking at this, it's amazing to me what you can get away with if you just have some personality with it. Because like I said, that other chapter is significant. Like a significant part of that is basically here's what's happened so far in the story in case you need a reminder. But yeah, like in both those cases, there's personality with it, and there's people talking back and forth, and one or both of them is being a smartass, and it doesn't bother you. It's not like here's information you need to know. I am hammering it into your skull, and so I think that's handled fairly well.
Oh yeah,
the skull would be hammering it into you, but
yeah,
it's still done very well.
Oh yeah.
The fact that Bob has as much personality as he does is a big saving grace of the series, because you need, not just in this book, but in general, if you have a world as complex as the Dresden Files, you need a lot of exposition. You're going to need something solid to get that exposition without bogging down the story, and Bob can do it.
You also need to know what the limitations of magic are. When you have a supernatural story, you need to know what the boundaries are, or everything just becomes a Deus Ex Machina. They pull a hat trick out. I mean, I think it's like your average Mary Sue / SJW / Kathleen Kennedy type writer, where stuff just happens. Oh, didn't that contradict everything about the laws of physics in their previous books? It's a science fiction story. We don't have to be consistent.
It's a story about space wizards meant for children. Stop taking it so seriously.
And it's like, if you were writing for children, you would have to take it a million times more seriously, because who is absolutely obsessive about you telling the story the same way you told it last night?
Yep.
Your 5-year-old.
Have you ever asked children about Pokemon stats? They know their stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing, wait, here, I have it here.
Orson Scott card, yep.
I need to get my ears back on one moment. And the other thing, like, I don't know if either of you are familiar with this.
No.
It's by Orson Scott Card, and one of the things he says is, that that basically the more clearly you set out the rules, the more you can use them to resolve the plot later without people calling Deus Ex Machina. If you explain what can happen and what can't happen, then you can use what can happen in interesting ways to resolve problems. Whereas if your rules are just things happen, then like you can't use like the audience is a lot more likely to say, oh, he just invented something on the fly to solve that problem that feels kind of cheap.
It doesn't have to be explicit, by the way. You can make it clear that you're telling a certain type of story, like a fairy tale, in which case you can have a kind of resolution happen because at some point in the story, the heroine or the hero was kind to this little old lady simply because he's the kind of person who would, and he sacrificed his last crumb of bread, or he broke it in half and shared it with her, and goes on. And if it turns out later that he is rescued from certain doom by this magical witch, nobody's going to bat an eye because everyone knows that's how fairy tales work. So you don't have to like hammer it into people's heads. You can allude to it, but you have to put it in there.
I'll say that it's the same thing. It's just different rules are being stressed. In one kind of magic, like Dresden Files, it's treated like a science, like a physics. It's treated as a consistent set of rules where you perform an action and the universe responds. But if you're telling a different kind of story, if you're telling a story whose focus is the value of, say, hospitality, in your case, then you're still following the rules. The character is still doing something that you still have actions having consequences, as opposed to the character is not getting rescued for no reason. The character is not getting rescued by something you couldn't have foreseen. It's something that was set up. It doesn't have to be just mechanics, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It can be things like kindness if this is a story about morality.
Yeah.
It still has to follow rules. Morality has rules too.
Yeah, well, no, it's just that certain types of stories, certain kinds of things can happen. You don't necessarily have to spell it out to the reader. It's whether it's a genre convention or it's just if it's been this kind of story has been around long enough, you got to expect a fable is going to have certain structures, a myth, a poem, a romance, a fairy tale, a science fiction story, and yes, stories of like psychic science fiction. If you have the character undergoing extreme privation and stress and all kinds of other things are happening, but you've established that he has some kind of psychic ability or the psychic abilities exist, you can have him suddenly pop out a relevant psychic power as long as you gave some little hints to it earlier in the story, and boom, he can now use that power in some interesting way.
Yes.
So it's just the type of story you're telling, but you cannot fail to lay the groundwork for it. You have to do that, and the more fun you do it, and the less hey guys, I'm letting you know what the rules are. Here's my little 3-page brochure on how to work with magic in this society.
Don't remind me of the infamous episode of Doctor Who where the climax was a 10-minute PowerPoint presentation about the new lore behind the series.
Yes.
Oh.
So don't do that.
Yes, let's talk about better books and better stories.
So to go back to the details of the story rather than story mechanics, one thing interesting in this one, there he details the 4 types of werewolves, and there's voluntary shapeshifters who basically learn a single spell to do to themselves. There are people who use a magical artifact of some type to transform themselves. They don't do any magic themselves. It's basically in the artifact. There are people who gain I don't know. There are people who gain berserkers, basically. There are people who gain unusual stamina and strength and healing ability, but don't physically transform, although mentally they are wolfish. I don't know the Latinate term for that. Anyway, lupine. Yeah, anyway, mentally they are a lupine. And there is the cursed one who transforms every full moon into a basically nigh unstoppable monster. And that is the one that is the only one that requires something special to do them harm, which in this case is silver. But not just silver, which I hadn't heard this one before. I don't know if you've seen other stories. It has to be silver that was inherited.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
and
that's an interesting touch.
Well, and okay, I hadn't heard that one before. I don't know if you've seen in other werewolf stories, and I was thinking about why that is. And my best guess as to why that's in this story is to make life more difficult for John Marcone.
Yeah.
Because
he could get his hands on rounds of silver bullets easily.
Mm-hmm.
But inherited silver, significantly, cuts down on the class on the people who can get that. And it also includes Harry in that class, as he realizes late in the story.
It's like with vampires, okay? If you're in a sciencey, like Harry Seldon said, world where it's very much input, laws of physics for this universe, output sort of thing. You just have to figure out how it works. So once you're in that universe, like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, that kind of vampire, and holy water doesn't work because of the divine power of the salvation of Christ and the blood of the Lamb. It just works because it works, right? It's just that's how the physics is. Well, why wouldn't you get super soakers? Why wouldn't you get fire hoses? Why? I mean, you have a priest come and bless a swimming pool. Bless the water treatment facility. So all the water coming out of the taps. I mean, on and on and on.
You're thinking of Unsung?
Yeah, but I'm thinking of that. There's just so many different things you can do, especially if you're a D&D gamer. And the characters in this book many of them are. Mm-hmm. In fact, you meet them here. They're going to be coming up doing that in later books. So these guys they think like role players. If you can massage, tweak, and otherwise abuse the rules, that's what you'll do. So the minute you allow it to be silver to work, instantly there's silver dust. You can create a silver solution. I mean, the possibilities are endless. You can go back to like super silver. And it's not that expensive.
There's the quite okay. Now I got the impression that silver itself, like if you tapped this werewolf with a silver spoon, it wouldn't care. So you have to have basically a silver sword can hurt him, but another sword can't. But it's not that he has a violent allergy to silver itself.
That's true.
You have to apply the force otherwise, and include silver with it.
Yeah, but think if you it's like a flamethrower. You douse the guy with silver, and now you shoot him with stuff, right? So every bullet that goes through is carrying a little bit of silver in it, and boom, your machine gun works now. Like think like a D&D player, right?
Yeah,
all I'm
that
saying
does
is
seem
that
to
we
apply.
have never had a Lone Ranger versus werewolves movie, and I think that's a crying shame.
Oh my goodness, yes, it must happen. This is terrible. We keep derailing your serious story.
Yes. Yeah,
no,
in fact, I'm going to derail it one more time because I looked up for a previous book discussion Zachlog and I had about how holy water works.
Ooh.
And you can't bless, according to the canons, you can't bless a lake or a pond or an ocean and turn it into holy water. Because that is not you have to contain it within an artificial container.
Right.
Which means that in Unsung, when he blessed the water contained by the Hoover Dam, it actually it would have worked according to the catechism.
Similar one on a smaller scale, by the way, is done in the movie Constantine. The one starring what's the guy's name? Keanu Reeves. And they bless a water reservoir on top of a building that goes down into the sprinkler system, and then they activate the sprinkler system and basically dust a bunch of demonic entities inside the building that way. But as is common on this show, it's back to the story or back to the poem. Let's see. And so Harry gets the substance of the report from Bob. Apparently types. I guess he must have a typewriter, because handwriting this would take a while. Although he never mentioned that, but it seemed, now that I think about it, it's more or less implied.
Yeah. Oh, he's got really good handwriting.
Well, I mean, if you can't use computer and print things out, you're gonna get more practice than most of us do today. Mm-hmm. But anyway, Harry gets up this report and takes it to the police station to give to Murphy, and the FBI agent Denton very thoughtfully agrees to be a courier for this, which lets Denton find out who he is. Also, and I noticed this kind of thing in Stormfront as well. Denton does not look Harry in the eyes.
Oh, yeah.
Like avoids Harry's eyes in more, like it mentions that, which is like if you move as you move through these books, you see little clues who is or is not in the know of what's going on. And in Stormfront, when Harry was talking to Monica Sells, when her husband came around, there was like static on their end of the line. It's like, that usually doesn't happen. I'm used to having problems on my end of the phone. Mm-hmm. And so there are little clues once in a while who to watch out for in these books.
He keeps the pace going fast enough that you don't always pause to notice. It's like the opposite of Speed, where they keep the plot going fast enough that you don't realize how stupid that the thing that just happened was. In this case, he keeps the plot going fast enough you don't notice that, here, I just told you something that you need to know about who the bad guy is, who the good guy is. That would kind of spoil the plot for you, but I just kept it going so fast that you didn't notice. So when Harry doesn't notice, that's fair, because you didn't notice it either as the reader, because you were too caught up.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
I want to mention, by the way, you mentioned the info dumps,
mm-hmm.
and you said that there were two info dumps, one with Bob and the other with Harry's subconscious.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually a third info dump chapter, and that's the one with Chauncey.
Yes!
And that one I found interesting because that's, I think, the most concrete example of Jim Butcher not quite having the world building down yet.
Mm-hmm.
So in, I believe it's chapter 11, Harry Dresden summons Chauncey, which is short for Zagoroth. And Chauncey is a demon. And it's very clear from this that he is a brimstone and fire type demon. He's not just described as one, but he refers to a Catholic saint as the other side. It's clear that in fact, in the third book, he is mentioned once, and he and Nicodemus are mentioned in the same breath.
Mm-hmm.
Later on, we see that that the fallen are the only devils that are active on Earth at the moment, and that they're very different. They're a lot more powerful than Zagoroth. Where even touching one of the coins and touching one mentally for a split second causes lifelong problems. Here, I still found that, despite the fact that it doesn't quite fit with the rest, you can sort of hand wave it away and say, this is a being from the Never Never who
mm-hmm.
acts like a demon because various parts of the Never imitate human mythology anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You could make that argument. And I'm willing
to
make that argument, and I'm willing to give the story the benefit of the doubt because it's very interesting. At
Mm-hmm.
first, you think it's a subversion of the demon summoning thing. Harry pretty straightforwardly makes a deal with it. It seems to be very polite, very well spoken. And then at the end, when it starts revealing information about about his mother, Harry realizes this thing's been manipulating me this entire time. It's been trying to grab all 4 of my names, which it could do who knows what, for an entire time.
That's
and
a very
it's
never
been setting
never
up,
thing.
Yes. And it's been setting me up just to reveal that it knows about it knows about Harry's mother,
Yep.
and just to make that temptation.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that.
Yeah,
I
it's
like
very
the
much
fact
a
that yes, I like the fact that he seems so non-demonic that even Harry lets his guard down for a bit, and then we see the real thing.
Yeah.
Well, and it
Also,
also
I did not realize that the word simp existed in 2001. I thought it was a much more modern term, but Harry uses it talking to Chauncey.
I think it had a different meaning than, because currently now it has a meaning that goes in with the practice of people who pay ethos and people like that money.
Yes, but
for
is
attention.
it derived from an older slang term?
Yes, I'm pretty sure it is. Like we're talking like almost gangster speak, like a chump, you know. But I'm gonna check etymology online real quick, and I've got, if necessary, I'll pull up my dictionary of the vulgar tongue, which is just around the corner. See how old it is. So,
yeah, and and so, well, another thing, like there's the Christian, the Christian understanding, the Christian definition of demons, basically more or less matches the characters we meet later, the Knights of the Fallen, the Knights of the Black and Denarius, which is corrupted angels. But in a lot of kind of, or at least in other kinds of stories, or in kind of popular culture, I don't think that is a universal understanding, and this does seem to be otherworldly monster of not particularly clear origin or purpose. Also, it kind of alter things that kind of get hammered out in later books but are not as clear now. I think Harry was worried that he was going to get in trouble for breaking the law of magic about the outer, about summoning outer beings, when when we actually get a much clearer look at that, like it's pretty clear Chauncey is not that kind of thing. And so that's another inconsistency with later in the series. So
yeah, it was interesting that Chauncey was bargaining for his immortal soul. The only thing that was really consistent with the rest of the series was the mention of Chauncey's hint that he actually did have living family. Now, Chauncey did not say what kind of family it was,
right,
but
and he paid that off beautifully.
Yes, but this was, I think this was the first indirect reference to Thomas in the series.
Yes. Even if the author didn't have that figured out yet, it gave him
but he's still
a direction to go.
Yep.
What do you think, Zach? Like, do you think that he had it figured out at that point, or do you think he, having put that in, because he wanted to give the orphan kid a hook for the demon to play with, and then he thought, well, what if the demon isn't just fishing, right? What if he isn't just making stuff up to manipulate Harry? What if it's true? And that got him to, well, what's the worst kind of family we could give a kid like Harry?
If you want it, because basically his purpose for Harry is to abuse him as much as possible.
Yeah.
So blood rights is where Thomas is shown. We find out who Thomas is.
Right.
And that's apparent. That's 4 books and 3 years published after this, after Full Moon, which isn't that long. So it could be that could have been in the plans already. I don't know. I will say, however, well, this doesn't seem like the kind of thing that Dresden or that Butcher would necessarily want to do. And also, in the other example, as far as I know, it was more or less accidental that it happened this way. But like, if you really wanted to abuse Harry as much as possible with Lost Family, I think like Luke and Princess Leia would be worse.
That's
Yeah.
yeah.
Wait, that was my sister I kissed.
Oh. That's not the authors having a better idea.
But I'm pretty sure whatever George Lucas says in The Empire Strikes Back, he hadn't come up with that yet.
Yep.
And I don't know if that's quite the kind of thing that quite the kind of approach that Jim Butcher would usually take. But
Also, the Chauncey thing is a really nice way to set up the peril inherent in summoning circles without giving away what's going to be happening in the later part of the story here in Full Moon. Because what we know is going to happen to, in hindsight, we all know what's going to be happening to Kim Delaney, right? However, at this point, we don't. We don't know what her point was and what she's going to do. This was a throwaway. The little scrap of paper gets thrown on the ground. Murphy picks it up. Boom, 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 boom. Everything's happening. Then you come back and you find out that, hey, she brought a Chauncey, and it was worse than a Chauncey. And now you know just how bad the Chaunceys can be. And this is something that, full-fledged wizard can handle, and it's considered an easy one. And then, so the reader, even if he didn't follow everything or remember everything from Stormfront, now has the information they need to assess the peril for Kim and for what Dresden's going to try to do when he's going to try to build a circle to contain the werewolf, which I really was kind of hoping he would get to pull it off. I was kind of sad that it didn't work out that way.
It is also kind of funny if you look at later in the series, because in that, actually I think in the first chapter, Harry says, this is a circle, Harry says to himself, this is a circle that's meant to contain this, and he includes archangels in the list. And I'm just like imagining like Harry summoning and trapping Uriel, and how that would.
Remember, he did summon Uriel with a summoning circle later on. In book 13 in Ghost Story, he summoned it, Uriel. And Uriel looked at the circle and just casually walked out of it and said, this is a very pretty circle, but you can't have expected it to hold me. I think we can roll that with Harry has not met actual archangels yet at this point.
Right. Or even a high enough demon of hell, for that matter.
Yeah, who could no doubt do the same thing. Mm-hmm. It's not inconceivable that he wouldn't know. Mm-hmm. He's gained more personal experience since then.
I know this is how it's supposed to work, but it doesn't.
Is Harry dead or, not in his normal state when he summons Uriel then? Because I don't remember that at all, and that's how most of Ghost Story is.
So this is in a flashback. Chronologically, it occurs during changes. This is during the part of changes that gets erased from his memory by Molly.
Right. Yes.
He is asking Uriel for help, and Uriel shows him what was later on, Uriel shows him what was done, but in the flashback, we see him asking for help, and Uriel says, "No, I can't help. I can only balance the scales later on." And that's when he calls up Mab.
Okay. Huh.
Oh, I take it back. This was actually during changes. This was not during the part that got erased from that Molly erased. I was getting the two scenes confused.
Right.
These are by.
It's one of those. It's one of those like the Dead Again movie or what's the one where they did the flipbacks? I can't remember what it was. The
Memento.
Yes. Where they
Yes.
just you have to interleaf what's going on, and sometimes it's hard to remember what went where. Yes. Yes.
Which, as an editor once advised me, can confuse and annoy readers, and you probably should just tell it in chronological order.
Yes. Generally speaking, unless you're very, very good.
Yeah.
Or you keep it simple. You keep it very simple. Like
Christopher Nolan can get away with it, but that doesn't mean everyone can get away with it.
Like Mary Stewart in a classic novel called The Ivy Tree, if I'm remembering correctly, has the character sitting on an overlook of the place that she's about to infiltrate, thinking like she's the only girl in the world, like Eve dreaming of Adam. And the book ends with kind of the same thing. At this point, you know who Eve and Adam are, and it's not the biblical story. But the author tells you up front in that opening scene what the truth is. Then she tells you a lie about the character and the scenario and who everyone is. Then you go throughout the whole scenario, you get a reveal, and you find out, oh, it's not what I thought it was. And you read it back and you go, oh, yes, now it makes perfect sense. And then it ends as it begins. Yeah, beautiful bit of storytelling, but some very pretty craftsmanship there. Mm-hmm. I reread it often because even if I know what everything's going to, already know how it's going to come out, it's just, oh, well done.
One thing I found pretty interesting in the story. Marcone offers Dresden a consulting job. He's like, look, put whatever number you want on this check, and you can work for me and handle supernatural issues. Mm-hmm. I guess I have the series order up now. So in 3 more books, actually we see someone else, and Harry shoots him down and insults him, because he kind of has that whole Spider-Man thing going, where he likes insulting people while he's trying to figure out the situation. But 3 more books in Death Masks, we see the person that Marcone actually does hire for that position, because he does find someone to fill the role of supernatural consultant and bodyguard, who in this case is Guard, and is a Valkyrie. Valkyries, by the way, in the original mythology, as far as I know, weren't actually warriors, but equality, feminism, blah blah blah.
It's also it also makes it more fun in this case, having her be not just a chooser of the slain, which is nice, but doesn't really give her any like real bodyguarding abilities. So it works. It's a trope that the warrior maiden trope, magical warrior maiden trope, existed long before feminism. You go to Athena, you've got the Amazons, you've got Bradamant. Everyone has done it. So it's.
I will also I will defend this on 2 fronts, based on the original Norse mythology. So they weren't just the choosers of the slain; they also guided the souls of the dead to Valhalla, which means they were taking them through active battlefields, because that's what Valhalla is. You got to think they're going to pick up a little bit of fighting skill along the way. They also were, when they did serve, they would also serve Odin his mead, and they would serve the other Norse gods their mead. And given how much mead the Norse gods go through, that's pretty good strength training, I would imagine. So I will, and the name actually means shield goddess or shield maiden. Mm-hmm. between all that, I think it's reasonable to interpolate and say that they would have some fighting skill.
Yeah.
So wait, they served the mead in Valhalla, so
They're
it
wenches.
would.
Yep.
Really hot, tough wenches.
Well,
Oh,
no,
yeah.
I was just thinking it would not be entirely unreasonable to describe to include in their job description waitress.
Correct.
And now I'm thinking of a character from my own story.
Yes.
Yeah, it would be reasonable to describe them as waitresses. And if you're a waitress in Valhalla, you're going to be you're not going to be it's not exactly Hooters.
Let's see. What else do I have
And
here?
they're apparently still maidens, which means they really can defend their dignity against a bunch of rowdy, drunk gods and heroes. So
Well,
yeah, I think they're probably pretty tough.
Yeah,
when
and
that does come up,
they ride the man-eating horses, and
Yeah.
they have spear. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd argue that this is fine.
Yeah.
when that does come up later in this series, by the way, Guard finds that idea rather amusing. So,
Which idea in particular?
Waitressing?
the maiden part.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a fair cop too when you consider how the rules were in the pagan world. Although, well, I don't know. It depended. I'd have to look up what the Scandinavian gods and goddesses got up to if they were as bad as the Greek ones.
Well, and the other thing, like even in the Greek mythology, like there were like the the Vestal virgins or temple virgins, and
Yeah.
messing with them
Mm-hmm.
is an excellent way to get yourself horribly executed.
Right.
So I think it would I think if you just put it in the context of like old world mythologies, it's not you could see it going either way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Besides, shield wenches just doesn't have the same ring as shield maiden in English.
I mean, I cannot read Old English. That the maiden part might not be accurate to the original, for all I know.
Oh, that
actually,
makes
hold
sense
on. I am looking this up.
Cool. Yes, you've dragged the wrong people into this dialogue.
Rhonda Hlin, which means shield goddess.
Ah.
So that actually doesn't. And then Oxmay, which means wish maid. Honestly, it could go either way. From what I'm
just goddess,
from
young
what
woman.
I'm reading, it's just there's a word called may or mir, and apparently it has two meanings. One of which being maiden, but the other one being daughter. And they're described as Odin's Maiar, which could mean Odin's daughters or the something like the Vestal Virgins. I genuinely can't tell from this. Zach, like one of these days, we're going to have a book discussion that's about the book that we're discussing, but that's not going to be tonight.
We'll get back
that
to
ship has sailed.
It goes that way with the poems too, and the poem talks tend to be shorter. But what was so okay. Later on in the story, I'm I'm flipping through notes. Chapter 15. Harry and Tara West, who is a werewolf, and B the fiance of another werewolf. In this case, is it Lou Garou, or do you say
it would be Lou?
Because
it's French.
It's French, and they never say the last letter. Last consonant.
They do for the P. Loop would be loop, because it would be Loup Garou. But maybe I'm wrong. I'll look it up.
I don't speak
French. I did look it up because I was curious. There's no P in it.
Oh, then it wouldn't. I thought it was Loup Garou. I don't actually.
No, I mean there's a P in the. There's a P in the spelling of it, but There's not in the actual pronunciation.
Okay,
Like a
that makes sense.
well-kept, like a well-kept pool, there's no P. But anyway, the so
You're right.
Harry meets up with Tara West, another werewolf, and with Harley McFinn, who is the big bad, terribly scary kind, transforms involuntarily into an enormous, nigh invulnerable rage monster. And like Harry is like trying to figure out who these people are and what is and like what everyone's angle is. And he's like, okay, so the circle that's supposed to contain Harley has been wrecked. Did Tara do it? Did Harley do it? As an excuse. And like I was reading that, I'm like, Justin, this doesn't make any sense. Like if Harley is the guilty party here, if Harley is deliberately setting this monster loose,
all he has to do is not be in the circle.
Yeah, all he has to do is not go to this particular place, and he's able to do this. Why would he destroy his own circle when it's obviously useful to him in general and not easy to not easy to reconstruct? And that was a point that kind of bothered me. Oh, something else. To rewind, when he was talking to Chauncey, Chauncey told him that the origin of the Lugaru, or at least this particular one, I don't know if there are others with other backstories, but is a curse by Saint Patrick that the members of this each generation, one member of this family would become this creature until the very end of the world. And two things. Well, one thing with that, my friend Chris pointed out, after this book, we never hear about them again. Which some people interpret this as as well. There's two things: either Jim Butcher lost track of that, and that's just a lost plot thread, or possibly the series is leading up to an apocalyptic conclusion, because this curse was supposed to continue to the end of the world. Guess what's coming next? And so that was an interesting point there.
So we know Tara West is still alive because Injun Joe in Summer Night mentions her and says that she sends her regards. So we know that she's still out there. If she was pregnant at the end of this story, then there would be another generation of Lugaru out there.
If they could turn into people. If they can't, then they're just wolves. Or do they turn into insane human beings in the full moon? In which case, how does that work out in the middle of nowhere? I mean, think about it. There you are, a perfectly cromulent wolf running around in the forest up in the mountains, which hundreds and hundreds of miles of nothing but woods and other animals. And suddenly the moonlight shines on you, and now you're a naked human being. You might be filled with the spirit of evil and malice as a human, but what are you going to do?
All right, but if you're as indestructible as the Lugaru was here,
yeah, exactly.
It doesn't matter whether you're in human form or wolf form. You're going to carve a
You don't actually have a lot of
natural
encounter. Armament,
All right, but what natural armament do you need? None of the animals that are going to try to harass you or stop you, none of them are going to hit you with inherited silver bullets.
No, I'm not talking about what's going to happen to you. I'm talking about what kind of carnage are you going to wreak with your little human fingers and your little teeth, right? You don't have just naked.
McFinn here. Mm-hmm. He was described as being short. Harry was actually taller than he was.
That's true.
He just
Harry's taller than everyone.
Right,
okay,
but he
fair
had
enough.
weapons.
But Harry is not taller than all He's taller than pretty much all the humans we meet in the story, but he's not taller than everyone else. He's not taller than all the supernatural entities. There are plenty of critters that are bigger than him. But McFinn's danger is not the fact that he's big. It's the fact that he's nigh on unstoppable.
But he uses tools. He uses whatever he has to hand to be violent. And when he does hit things, he's usually hitting other people, right, that are also soft and can't fight back. Or if they do, that they don't fight back well. But if you're doing this in the woods, the wild animals can run away. They fly away. I mean, you might attack a tree or a fern. I mean, I'm just wondering, how much damage can you really do as a naked human being in the woods to anything?
Okay, I'm going to find out this weekend, okay? I'll go out in the woods naked and see how much damage. I'll report back.
All right. I will answer this. According to Minecraft, the answer is quite a lot of damage. You could potentially kill an ender dragon in under 10 minutes from a start naked in the woods if you do it right.
And you can also punch trees down.
Yes,
exactly. Yeah. So don't underestimate these people.
Right. All right. I just like that idea. You could do a whole story about that, like he did with the Sasquatch kid late in one of the short story collections, where you've got the kid who's the were-human, cursed to turn into a human at the full moon, and a crazy one at that, the schizophrenic.
So to slightly refer back to another conversation Harry and I have had, and I had mentioned this idea to him a little bit a couple days ago. I did notice actually what looks to me like a little bit of a point of theodicy in this book.
Okay.
It's not a major idea and it's not really explored, but I think it's there, and I wonder if either of you can see what I'm pointing to.
Okay.
Unless you're talking about the fact that the curse was allegedly given by St. Patrick. I don't know.
Yeah, that's it, actually. Okay, and by the way, for people who aren't as into obscure vocabulary as I, theodicy is basically the question of how can a good God be reconciled with a world with suffering and pain? And in this case, at least if you take Chauncey's word, which the other things he has said actually turn out to be correct. So it seems plausible that he's telling the truth about this. If you take Chauncey's word, this curse originates with St. Patrick. Okay?
But there's the exact wording comes into play here. Chauncey's exact words were, sometime in the murky past, legend would have it the man known as St. Patrick cursed his ancestor. Chauncey might be telling the complete truth that legends say that St. Patrick did it.
But if that is the case,
if that's the case,
then you have an interesting problem because, regardless of that, this seems reasonable to me. Okay, if you have a saint, recognized, by the church. If the saint performs a miracle, I think it is reasonable to attribute that miracle to God, to God's will. Because if the saint is doing something that a human is not going to be able to do, and you believe this,
I'm not
seem
saying
skeptical.
Because the way the universe has been unfolded so far, keeping in mind that Chauncey is, at the end, you find out he's a liar from day one.
No.
So everything he said.
No,
right?
he's not. He's
In other words, he's a deceiver. Sorry, that's the
he's
wrong
a deceiver.
word.
Yes.
Yes. So he will say things like, if you ask me what's your favorite color, and I reply, oh, I absolutely adore the color purple, and I go on a rant about purple, when in fact my favorite color is, say, blue. I've told you nothing but the truth, and I've deceived you. So,
Yes.
because I do like
which is an
purple,
important
it's just
distinction
not.
if we're arguing this.
Because that's how the demons operate, and they've just revealed that. So given that that's the kind of universe it is, people could be lying about what, or deceiving you about who the ultimate source of power for any Catholic saint is. It doesn't mean it's not God, but it also doesn't mean that it is within the world that Butcher is building here. Now, I tend to think that he is more on the side of, I have just allowed the Catholic Church level demons to exist. And I also have allowed the Christian principles of mercy, forgiveness, repentance, and grace to all be true, including the supernatural power of redeeming love, even though he doesn't specifically mention Christ. That being the case, if I'm going to tell that story and make it honest, I'm going to have something that's even remotely equivalent to how Christians understand the Godhead to also be true, because otherwise you can't get the good things to counteract the darkness, because there really isn't another religion that does it quite like Christianity does. Not if you're going to use that mythology and those tropes, because that redemption, that loving grace, that sacrifice, that's pretty unique to Christianity. Actually, not pretty unique, it is unique. What do you guys think?
I'm thinking. I mean, I think there's three possibilities.
Okay.
One possibility is that Chauncey is being deceptive, that the legend says that St. Patrick did it, even though St. Patrick didn't actually do it.
Mm-hmm.
The second possibility is St. Patrick did it, but with magic, which in this universe does not necessarily require doing anything unholy.
Correct.
You could have a saint perform magic in this context.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why you would curse someone to become a murderer like this, but in general, in the Dresden File, you could have a saint do something like, say, power a defensive circle, like multiple characters do to protect themselves from supernatural threats. There's all kinds of magic that can be done without doing any kind of invoking any kind of demonic entities or doing anything immoral.
Yeah.
And the third possibility is that St. Patrick did it, and it was through the power of God. And that, I agree, that's a bit hard to explain.
Yeah. Within the context of the world and Christian theology.
Yeah.
There is that actually reminds me of something I would kind of like to see Jim Butcher do at some point, because I've read a couple of the collections of short stories. Actually both, because there's two so far that I know of. And one interesting thing in both of them is that in both of them you get a couple of stories from the point of view of other characters, and I think something that I would like to see is a story with Father Forthill, where he is defending where he is facing off against a supernatural threat of some kind, and I think that would be a pretty interesting would be a pretty interesting one.
Do we get any saints in the story? I mean, legit canonized, not just beatified saints in Butcher's story? In other words, this person is a wizard and they're a saint, because there's nothing in either, as far as I know, I'm not a Catholic, but as far as I know from Catholic theology, there's the sainthood of a person doesn't depend on their profession. They can be a myriad of different things. If your profession is a wizard and you're martyred for Christ, I mean, look at Harry's best friend and Molly's dad. If there was ever a person who might end up getting canonized down the road in this universe, he'd qualify. So are there any other ones?
When we see when Forthill is might or might not die,
Mm-hmm.
the angel of death is there specifically to guard his soul, not to kill him, but to keep him safe, because she says that the forces of hell would grab him even from the gates of heaven if they could. But something I'm trying to remember. I thought that there was a short story with Fort Hill as the main character, but I've been looking, and
not in either of the collections. It's
not in either of the
briefcases
collections
and side jobs. Do I have? Yeah, I have briefcases and side jobs. I don't know if there's something published elsewhere.
There's been a couple published elsewhere, but I just looked, and none of those. Okay. The one I was thinking of was the Warrior. We see him in
Michael
there,
Carpenter.
but he's still not the. We see.
Well,
Fort
actually,
Hill in
no.
that one.
Yeah. The Viewpoint character is still Harry,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yes.
Michael Carpenter just plays a prominent role.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I remember that story because Harry was surprised that in his day job he actually does say mass, and he actually does do the stuff you would expect a Catholic priest to do when he's not, assisting with the latest crisis. Yeah, I don't know if we've had any actual saints, but given how long it takes for canonization, it would have to be a historical figure. Not that we haven't seen historical figures show up or be referenced, but
I don't know.
You would have to. I mean, if you believe Chauncey says that Harry's mother went to heaven.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if we can believe him because, well, this is.
How would he know?
Yeah. Yeah,
And
Chauncey's
also
not one of the fallen.
And also, like, in the way, give me a second. From his point of view and the way he's talking about it, and I don't remember what he specifically said, but like someone who is in purgatory and on the way is still lost to them.
Mm-hmm.
True. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, which quite what he said there, but that seems like that would fit as well.
Yeah, or if he's not a demon at all, if it's just a never never thing, and him saying that the Dark Prince lost her could just mean that she died before that particular part of the never never got to her. Like, you can spin this. I don't think Butcher had any of this in mind, but you can make it work.
Also, he doesn't say that he knows she's in heaven or purgatory or anything like that. He just refers to, I know all about your mother's past, her redemption, and unnatural deaths of both mother and father. So just because she was redeemed, according to his words, doesn't mean that as far as he may indeed know where she is, but he probably doesn't. All he knows is at some point she experienced a redemption arc. What that actually means in terms of the story. He has to tell the truth. So somehow she redeemed herself from something, but we don't know.
Right.
Could be a lot of things. What do we know about Harry's mother, about where she ended up? I don't remember. And we're going off now, so we should get back onto the story.
Well,
yes.
Okay. So to this story, a little later on, Harry, Harley has been arrested and is in a jail cell, and the full moon comes up, and this is the first time we actually see the Lugaroo in action, and he transforms in and smashes his way out of the jail cell, totally rips apart several of the prisoners nearby, and then basically smashes his way out into the police station. And into basically SI department. One thing I find at one point, Harry is being chased by this creature. Murphy comes and stands over him with a gun, facing down the monster. And Harry's like, "Well, we're both about to die because I've seen other people trying to shoot this thing and do nothing at all."
Mm-hmm.
And Murphy fires and actually does injure the creature. and it turns and goes somewhere else. And I think it's kind of funny because by this point, Harry has been arrested. Murphy completely distrusts him, but she is also taking his advice in a life or death situation, which is an interesting contradiction there.
Yeah, I mean, I think she definitely unlike the rest of the department, unlike someone like Carmichael, she knows full well that there are supernatural things out there and that Harry knows something about it. Right now, she doesn't believe that Harry is on her side, but that doesn't mean he's wrong.
Not only that, but she's pissed, she's angry, she doesn't trust him, but it is obviously a personal trust. She feels personally betrayed, and she's carrying that over like Dr. Fauci, I am the science, I am the police, you're betraying the law because you personally let me down. But she's also enough of a professional that when the chips are down and she needs to actually deal with the crisis at hand and people's lives are at stake, she isn't going to allow her personal need to get her own back to interfere. But it's clear that Karen can be petty, and this is an example of her arresting him when she knows full well that he couldn't possibly be responsible for any of this. Not and also be doing the things he's doing to try to stop it. He puts himself at risk so many times when he didn't need to in this story. It seems odd that anything other than a personal grievance would cause her to miss it. But if it's a big enough personal grievance, that's human nature, right?
What was so also in this part of the story, we have the first appearance in the Dresden Files of Rudolph, who here is a rookie cop. Eventually, manages to get his way out of special investigations, and I believe he is in internal affairs later in the story, and ends up. Spoilers for later books, ends up being the one who kills Murphy, and very nearly gets killed by Harry Dresden himself, which I think we had that I think we had that talk during when we went over Battleground, how justified Harry was or wasn't at that moment. But and so that's the first time we see Rudolph in these stories. Let's see.
And interestingly, he's not actually nothing stands out about him as being a particularly bad person yet. In this book, not that he's here for long, but in this book, it's he's scared, and that's about it. He's scared, and he grabs a Snoopy doll for Dresden, in order so that Dresden can save the day with it.
And he thinks Dresden is crazy, but so do a lot of the other people in the police department.
Yeah, like that doesn't. Like Carmichael thinks that that doesn't make him stand out at this point.
It is odd, though, if you see a man transformed into a werewolf rampaging through your station, that you wouldn't begin to reconsider all your opinions about the viability of the existence of magic and whether or not this dude is, in fact, a wizard. I mean, I think you keep your options open at least.
He would be what TV tropes would call a flat earth atheist by the end of this. At first, he's just understandably, he doesn't know, but neither do most people.
Yeah.
But in this and in Death Masks, he repeatedly sees firsthand the supernatural stuff.
Yep.
And he's in active denial about it.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing to keep in mind is what we know and what the character knows. He did not see McFinn transform.
Yeah, he just saw
the werewolf.
All he knows is something is all we are certain he knows is something is tearing apart the police station and mauling police officers. As far as he knows, how the heck did a bear get into a Chicago police station?
Right.
Like,
Right.
that would be...
That's a fair cop. He has rationalizations available to him.
Which is probably why at this point he's not quite hateable yet.
Yes.
It's because he does still have rationalizations. It's it's as we keep going and as those other explanations run out that he starts becoming a worse character.
Yeah, but what we've seen in the past 3 years, the people who can willfully pretend that reality isn't real, up to the point that you're looking at them and asking them why they think wet pavements cause it to rain. So the human capacity for that is close to infinite, apparently. So it's a fair cop to have characters who are like that.
Well, and what was okay, so and a little later, after Harry manages to temporarily to forestall the threat, basically Harry gets out of the police station, is driven away and basically passes out, and he has this dream sequence where he talks to his subconscious, who is a jerk, and we have that. I don't know how often it happen. That comes up. That comes up again a few times. I know it does in Skin Game. I don't know where else. And it sounds like Harry Seldon might be able to clue us in on that. He's reread more of the series recently. It's kind of...
It shows up in Skin Game, and I need one moment. There is a third instance where it shows up, and that is the final. That is the one where Lash dies.
White Knight. White Knight is that one.
Yep, that's the one. He shows up there, and he's the one who clues. He's the one who clues Harry in on what's really going on, and on the fact that and tells Harry that he's been talking to Lash behind Harry's conscious back for this whole time.
But what was that? And so like I said earlier, this chapter is largely that chapter is, in terms of the story, is basically a recap of the plot so far. But again, if you package it right, people don't mind. And also, it was kind of funny to me because I was reading this, and it basically ends with his subconscious reminding Harry, "Hey, don't forget about Parker and the Street Wolves, the gang he had run across earlier."
Right.
And that's the next thing that happens. And I was looking at that, and I was thinking about in terms of story mechanics, how the story is built, and I was thinking, it seems entirely plausible to me that the reason this scene exists is because the scene was added later, because if it wasn't there, basically those characters were introduced and they haven't done anything for a good while in the story. And if this scene wasn't there, when they come back up, you're like, what? Who? Why are we talking about them again? And I kind of wonder if this scene was not in an earlier draft of the story, and then someone pointed out to Jim Butcher, they kind of pop back up out of nowhere. You've got to to introduce this somehow. And
everything
it
is
works.
so tightly plotted up to that point. You can't weave them in and have him notice them hanging outside the police station or something, because there's really no place you could jam in a little extra Street Wolves, because everything's going.
If they showed up at all, they're not the kind to do subtle show up subtly, like Marcone.
Mhm.
Marcone's mentioned, but Marcone can show up and have a pleasant conversation with you,
Yes.
even if he's planning on killing you later or something. But the street wolves, if they show up, they're going to be trying to kill you actively.
Mhm.
You
Or
can't just
someone
have
can reference
make a
Marconi.
small
He's
appearance.
a big guy, so you could reference something that he's going on. Another character references, "Are you in bed with Marcone?" Like uh, Murphy's partner, the gentleman who
Carmichael?
dies. Yes, he mentions Marcone. Is it true about you? So it keeps Marcone and what's going on in the reader's mind. So that could happen, but why would anyone reference the street wolves?
Right.
Know, so.
I think that's plausible, but if this scene was only made to fix that, I'm genuinely impressed because he went over and above what he needed to.
Yep.
And
Well, it was also
he introduced
to recap.
a character that was
plot.
useful multiple times in the rest of the series.
Yes. Other Harry, the Harry that gets laid more.
Or the one who wants to, anyway.
Yeah, well, there you go. Who thinks he could? That's a good way to put it.
So let's see. What was also when Harry does actually meet up with Street Wolves coming up next, he gets himself hyped up with basically magical super coffee, which is one of the potions he had mixed up earlier. And because of the influence of that, he basically overextends himself and blows magically blows his kneecap. I guess you could say. And basically he's magically spent for the rest largely for the rest of the book. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about later he does something. But I was also looking anyway. Which actually that happens in the next book in a different fashion. Basically in the third book, someone manages to steal a significant part of Harry's power, magical power. And I think that idea is handled better here, because Harry doesn't actually do a lot of magic most of the rest of the book. Whereas in that one, like in the third book, while Harry theoretically is magically crippled, he also does this enormous fire I feel like there's an actual word for it, fire tornado spell. And it's like, wait, so what could he do if he actually had his full power? Because that looks like a lot there. And that one didn't quite carry out as well.
To be fair, in the next book, he gets backup from his own ghost. So that's a potential source of power he wouldn't normally have. That was a weird mechanic. I won't lie about that. That was weird.
And I had thought about he does do that spell. He does do a spell at the end of this book. And then when I got there, because this is a reread, I realized it's basically his, wind spell. He, puts more oomph into it than usual. It's basically his wind spell, which he can usually do on the fly. He can usually do that, on a moment's notice without thinking about it. Whereas in this case, he has to build a circle, concentrate power, and then send it, which is things he usually does for bigger magic, which matches, again, basically a crippled state. Like he can do it, but like something he would usually be able to do at an instant's notice, he has to plan for. So I think that carries. I think Butcher carries that off pretty well in this book. Less well in the next book.
Yeah.
I don't know. Okay, wait. Sorry, I'm trying to think of.
Yep.
Go ahead.
It's interesting that both potions in this book actually backfire on him. the super coffee potion backfires, as you just said. He runs completely dry very quickly because it doesn't actually give him more energy. It just makes him feel like he has more. But the invisibility potion, or the more accurately, the somebody else's problem potion that he makes, that also backfires because that stops him from potentially warning people and saving lives when McFinn breaks out.
I was thinking when I read it, this reread, that, wow, Butcher, you just have the best insight about the absolutely most perfect potions your wizard is going to need. It felt a little too on the nose
Convenient.
for
Well,
convenient
he
for
did,
him to have made them.
Did.
But keep in mind, the needing to be invisible to the werewolf, that makes perfect sense. Then the coffee potion and the way they were used, they just perfectly came in handy. Exactly the right potion you need to solve the problem. But they don't solve the problem, do they? They create new problems. So it immediately cuts out that if the reader might be feeling a little too convenient, and then he cuts Dresden's knees out from under him, and it turns out not to be. But yes,
yeah, and
backlog.
The only one of those that's the kind of coincidental one is the coffee, because he was saying, I need to be able to avoid a wolf's senses, and wolves, and and I think what is it? I think Bob says he could do invisibility, but that wouldn't cover everything because wolves have better smell and hearing. And so he goes this other route, like just don't pay attention to me, kind of thing. Let's see.
It turns out to be the perfect potion for breaking into a police station, which would never. It's the only thing that he absolutely had to get into the police station, and there was absolutely no way he could possibly do it unless he had a potion. But you have to spend like a whole day practically to make these potions. It's not like something you can just go, boom, I need a potion right away. It doesn't work that way. So he gets him exactly what he needs at the right time, just presciently, and then he undercuts it again by having it turn out to cause problems too. So it's nicely handled, says the woman who isn't writing stories that are bestsellers.
What was and so let's see. So after Harry blows his magical hamstring, the street wolves capture him, beat the snot out of him for a while. I think also another thing from later in the series, Waldo Butters says, like, wizards, he thinks it's part of the same reason they can do magic, but wizards heal things that normal humans wouldn't be able to heal. And that's pretty good, because the number of times Harry sustains serious beating or physical abuse, it's like, if this were a normal human, like he'd just not be there at all after, like, book 4 or 5, which also reminds me of
the concussions alone from being bopped in the head to knock him out would be a serious problem after the first few.
Yep.
Well, yeah, and that's what was in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I forget his name, but there's the teacher mentor character, who every other episode gets knocked unconscious, and as someone pointed out, like, so if you look at how this actually operates, by the end of the series, he literally should be mentally retarded from all of the brain damage he has sustained. So,
it's not just that; it's all the bullet shots and the burnings and the poisonings. I mean, that's got to take a toll, right?
What was So yes, Harry gets taken back to the Street Wolves base, and then Marcone comes to meet him there, and then while Marcone is there, the FBI agents come, and the FBI agents, it turns out, are also werewolves. At which point, I don't know if you guys have you. I don't know if you guys have watched the John Wick movies.
No.
But like by halfway through John Wick 3, I think it's reasonable to ask, like, is there anyone in these movies who is not a secret assassin?
Okay.
Because the entire world appears to be primarily populated by secret assassins, and it's like,
oh man, I gotta watch these movies now.
well, yeah, because like in number one, it's kept relatively reasonable, but like, you know, the natural progression of these things is to make things bigger each time, and then like by number three, it's like, apparently New York City is primarily populated by secret assassins, and because every third person he runs into is part of it.
Hang on there now. Hang on there. I'm gonna take the different point on this, because I'm going back to chapter 3, where he's talking to Bob about all the different kinds of, here we go, maybe the werewolves there are. He says, you know, there's the theriomorphs, people who know one spell, and that's how they can turn into wolves. And we meet them with the alphas, right? And presumably we think Thera, but no. And however, Bob warns you, anybody can turn into anything. We're buffaloes, remember? So we're humans is perfectly cromulent. Then he goes into great length about what are these guys? The Hexen Wolf, right? A powerful sorcerer working behind the scenes who can give people magic artifacts that take a spirit of evil and allow it to take over your body and transmogrify you into a wolf. So he goes into detail about all the different types of wolves, including, of course, the type that what's his face is, the Kara's sweetie, the one who's the Lugaru. So he's put the pistol on the mantelpiece, right? He's got to fire it. Well, now we finally get it's a 3-barreled pistol, right? Or 4-barreled or whatever. We finally got the last round.
But okay, we are. I think we're getting close to 2 hours.
The 2-hour mark.
I think we gotta wrap it. Yeah, we gotta wrap it.
Yeah, I will say one thing which is left. Okay, and so at the conclusion of this, Harry does manage to kill McFinn, even though that wasn't his goal. He would have preferred, since McFinn is in a sense an innocent victim as well, he would have preferred to contain him, but he does end up killing him. And Susan gets video footage of this, which goes on the news briefly and then entirely disappears. And he's like, we don't know why it disappeared or where it went. And that's not really addressed. That's not really spoken of. However, considering the FBI were involved, I think if you read the whole way through the series, if you read up to Battleground, I think there is a suggestion who may have disappeared the footage. Because apparently the Library of Congress has
its paramilitary arm.
Well, every government agency does, so why not?
It's true, actually.
Department of Agriculture, right?
Yep.
And not only does the Library of Congress have some kind of supernatural branch, apparently big players in the supernatural world are actually kind of scared of them. So I was thinking, like, well, why did this disappear? The FBI agents were involved. I think the Library of Congress would actually be a pretty good suspect there, even though it's not named at this point. Or, as far as I know, that question is not brought up again during the series.
So far, yes, the question of who gave them the wolf pelts is brought up. Mm-hmm. But the question of who got rid of the footage isn't. And when he's considering who could have given him the wolf pelts, thinking, all right, somebody's enemy on the White Council, somebody in the Never Never who hates me. Yeah, there's some suspects. Those make sense, but none of those make sense for suppressing video footage.
No.
But
it doesn't necessarily need to be connected. I mean, knowing
yeah,
our
it could
government
be.
and how it works.
Yeah,
and
that's
as much
that's
as they
what
tend to be
example.
secretive, it also doesn't really seem like quite the White Council's usual mode of operation either.
Yeah.
No, they wouldn't. They wouldn't. I don't think any of them have TVs, so how would they even find out?
Right.
And B, even if they did find out, I don't think they would
feel like I
care
didn't
that
quite.
much.
Could you repeat that last part? I didn't quite catch it.
I don't know if the camera has TVs. They're having issues. They have issues with technology, just like Zachlog just did. Which, by the way, is how we know Zachlog's hidden magical talent. I know you try to hide it, but they're not exactly up for doing things like paying off experts to claim that the tapes were fake and disappearing films and backup copies of films. That's not the kind of thing they're good at. I would love to see how information-based magic or memetics-based magic would work in this universe, but so far we don't have any of it. And even if we do, it's not White Council.
No. I'd like to point out that the death of the loup-garou, whose name I keep blanking on, Tara's fiance, was necessary for this story not to end on moral hazard, because one of the problems with someone like in these vampire and werewolf stories is you have a viewpoint character, or a character that the viewpoint character cares about, who is nonetheless a mass murderer. But you never get the victim stories. You never get the stories of the people he murdered. Maybe he didn't want to murder them. He's not, I don't think his mortal soul's in jeopardy. He's done everything in his power to stop himself from hurting others, barring suicide, which is, again, mortal sin. But you can't have him have a happy ending unless you have enough time and space as an author to show him off in a cell somewhere doing acts of penitence and spending the rest of his life trying to make up for the wrong he's done. You can't just have the character go, oh, we like him, he's on screen, right? We feel sorry for him, so it's okay, right, for him to be rescued and have everything good and have a happy ending and get to run off into the woods with his fiancée Tara. Because so many other people, good people like Carmichael, don't get to go home to their wives and children.
Right.
And if you're going to tell a story that's a moral story, which Butcher is clearly trying to do, full of flawed people who have terrible things happen, you have to be true to the moral truths of the universe, which do exist, in order for a story to be true and to be good. And Butcher beautifully manages to keep that going through most of the books. I haven't run across a serious flaw that way in any of my rereads.
Okay. Well, I think we I did want to say, okay, one other. This is going to be my last main thing. Okay. I think every book so far includes a soul gaze at some point.
Yes.
And Jim Butcher, I think, slowly refines how he's handling that, because in the first one it's all very vague. And in this one it's a lot more like it is in later ones, because it's kind of a presented as Dresden having a vision almost. Although Butcher also later says that each wizard experiences it differently, and I think he said some have said that it's like hearing music for them. But anyway, and he sees Denton's soul, the soul of the one FBI agent, and he describes it as like being this. Imagine this beautiful, kind of classical, this beautiful, classical arcade in the Parthenon kind of sense, and happy families and all this stuff. but then like slowly decayed and grown over and turning into something rather horrible. And I looked at his description of Denton and I'm like, I kind of feel like he's talking about basically America today. It's like there's this grand thing was beautiful in the past, and everything is slowly being covered in sludge.
It was an evocative image.
Yes, it was.
The description of the soul gaze in this chapter.
Yes, it is.
And it's also there's also another time later in the series where basically he deals with a cop who's seen too much, and is it's kind of caused that cop, although it's a warden in that case, doesn't go as far bad as Denton does, but is still kind of getting twisted up. But yeah, that's something he comes back to. Okay. Hobbit, any last thoughts you want to put in on the story before we close out for the night?
Oh, yes. There is our Dictionary of the Vulgar Tongue. The simpleton, this dates back to the 1700s, is an abbreviation of Simple Tony or Anthony, a foolish fellow. Now, if you go forward to 1903, it is shortened to simp in gangland, Joyzy Mafia style, and it's a simpleton,
which is where,
but it's a sucker.
Which is where Harry would have gotten it, given that he not only is a film noir detective, he grew up on drive-by theaters of detective shows, and that's part of how he lives his life.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
Okay. And so the etymology, its current etymology sort of evolved in parallel. That's fascinating because I read that here, and it felt very out of place for 2001.
It did.
But that makes sense. Mm-hmm. If it's old slang that's being brought back, we need to bring more old slang back. Oh,
Bedside
nice, reading. Very nice, very nice.
I use it. We use it in the comic.
Okay, and Harry, how about you? Any last thoughts you wanted to get before we close for tonight?
I am so far quite enjoying this reread. There's a lot of stuff that you don't pick up the first time around. Some of those things are flaws, which we've talked about, but a lot of it is little details, little nuances that didn't have to be there, but make it rewarding to reread and make the world feel more real.
And I had heard someone say this, and I not a year or so ago, I reread Grave Peril, which is book 3, the next one. And there is a lot in book 3 that comes up in important ways later in the series. And I assume that there's more to come still. But we can talk about that if and when we get to book 3. Okay. Well, like I said, we could keep going for a while, but
we shouldn't.
We probably shouldn't.
All of us have other things to do, and I don't know how many people are going to want to stick around for this long in the show. So, thank you both for joining me. Anyone still watching, thank you. I hope you found this interesting. And
if you didn't, I'm amazed that you stuck with it this long. So that's commendable.
Yeah, or something.
All right. Good night.
Good night, all.